How are you, Dr. Adam? It's so good to see you.
Oh, I'm really well, thank you, Hunter. All the better for seeing you and seeing your, the joy and happiness that you exude. So cheering me up, taking my nerves away. It's all good.
Oh, good. Yeah, you could see, I don't know how much of the last talk you talked, but Anastasia, I was just kind of like mucking through some words, and she brought me out of the mud, and a lotus was born by what she was said. So, I am here to just make all the mistakes on all y'all's behalf, so you're good to go.
Love it. Love the springtime analogy. The buds coming up. Brilliant.
That's right. That's right. So I'll pass the ball over to you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me back. Really, really appreciate it. Cool. I just need to share my screen. Oh, okay. Excellent. Right. Hi, everyone. As I said, I'm very grateful to come back to Power to Fly Summit and giving a talk on something that's very close to my heart, which I talk a lot about, which is how to prevent and address workplace bullying. I'm Adam Harrison, and I'm a physician by training and now primarily a leadership coach. But before I kind of launch into it, I feel so honored to be giving this talk on such an auspicious day. So I just want to say happy International Women's Day to everyone who is watching. And I hope everyone is having a wonderful, empowered day. So, and in a moment, you'll see why this is so close to my heart. So the aims and objectives of this talk, it's rather a lot of information to go through, so bear with me kind of dashing through it, but I'm going to be talking about the definition, types of and terms for workplace bullying, because it's quite varied, and there's a lot of things that people don't always think are bullying, but actually they are. Talk about the types of people who are more likely to experience workplace bullying, the types of people who are more likely to be the workplace bullies, and why I think that is, how companies and organizations can be proactive about preventing bullying in the workplace. After a bullying incident occurs or has been reported, what's the appropriate company response? How should the company respond when something like this has occurred? And how can colleagues or other bystanders respond to the incidents if they witness them? Just a little bit about me. As I said, I'm a certified leadership coach. I have a special interest in workplace bullying and kind leadership, and that comes from my own personal experiences. I've experienced a lot of workplace bullying when I was a junior doctor over about a 5-year period, I think it's fair to say. So I coach and train on these areas for various organizations, and also do stuff on burnout and loads of other subjects. But I really enjoy talking about workplace bullying and kind leadership. I have a leadership background myself. I've been a medical director for a couple of organizations local to me, and vice chair of the local medical committee. So I've been on the receiving end of not very good leadership and bullying, and I've seen it kind of happening at the leadership level as well. I passed the bar in 2014, so I'm a qualified attorney as well. And I've been a doctor for the most length of time. And as I say, that's really when most of my bullying experiences occurred. And, with regard to me really celebrating International Women's Day, although I celebrate every day for women and all the amazing women in my life, I launched my podcast called Inspiring Women Leaders at the end of May last year. So check that out if you're interested. So let's launch into it with some definitions then. So Doctors Ruth and Gary Namey, who co-founded the Workplace Bullying Institute in the US, define workplace bullying as repeated health-harming mistreatment by one or more employees of an employer to another employee, including but not limited to abusive conduct that's either verbal abuse, behaviors which are threatening, intimidating, or humiliating, or work sabotage in some combination. And actually, just reading from my notes here, because in the UK, it's slightly different. To be classed as bullying in the UK, as per the Dr. Namey's definition of it being repeated, it has to be repeated. It has to be intended to hurt the recipient. That's very explicitly stated. And it has to be unwanted by the recipient, which, you know, I'm sure most of us can understand that that is usually the case. All right. So different types of workplace bullying. So most of us are aware of the more, you know, overt forms of bullying, both inside and outside the workplace, you know, the kind of stuff that goes on in school playgrounds, you know, that kind of aggressive physical type of bullying. But there's so many more different types of bullying that go on. For example, there's obviously the physical and verbal aggression, threats, intimidation, publicly criticizing someone, shaming them, berating them, belittling them, ostracizing them, so excluding them, gossiping about them, spreading rumors about people, sexual harassment, racial discrimination, discrimination on the grounds of someone's belief system or religion, homophobia and transphobia, personal attack on a person's private life, or physical attributes, you know, like the size of their ears or the size of their nose or their weight or something like that, and offensive jokes around all of the above. But then there's the more subtle or covert forms of bullying that we see in the workplace and also in other situations, like in the home, when we're out with friends who, you know, may not always be that friendly, and even when we're out at the shops, such as the following: passive aggression, gaslighting, casual racism, microaggressions, ableism, etc. And then these are what I think are the types of specifically work-related bullying categories. So being excessively criticized, usually by a manager, or unjustly criticized, so the criticism is not justified, and or withholding praise. So when praise is, you know, you expect praise to be due, it's being withheld. Withholding essential information, so someone withholding information that you need to be able to do a task in your job successfully, such that, you know, without it you can't do it, and then they're setting you up then for some kind of, you know, discipline or you know, other kind of problem. Withholding job responsibilities, and what kind of springs to my mind, you know, in this area is training opportunities. So kind of looking back when I was a trainee surgeon long time ago, you know, if the boss didn't like you, if the attending didn't like you, they wouldn't let you scrub in. You know, they wouldn't let you do anything interesting. Maybe they just get you holding the retractor or something like that, but they wouldn't kind of like get you really involved. And then they had their favorite trainees who it was very clear that they were letting them do a lot more. Over monitoring of work, which for me is much more than just micromanagement. Micromanagement is bad enough. We all know that. We've all been on the receiving end of that. But over monitoring, kind of like just really, you know, over scrutinizing your work. I mean, I've had jobs, a couple of jobs actually, where my bosses have kind of kept a sort of a dossier of things where they had thought that I should have done it differently, but they didn't tell me at the time. So, you know, to me, good leadership is if someone makes a little error, you kind of like have a word with them as soon after the event as possible and say, oh, you know, this didn't go very well. You know, can you try it this way next time? And that's it. It's kind of like, you know, over and done with. But when people are actually kind of writing a list and kind of creating a dossier of things against you and then bringing you into a meeting, you know, a month later or something, saying here are 15 things that we want to, you know, pick on you about, essentially, that to me is a form of bullying. And then finally, setting unrealistic goals, unrealistic deadlines, or unrealistic workloads. Again, all of these things are setting someone up to fail with really I think the express intention, certainly, you know, it's intended, you know, the definition is intended to hurt, you know, the express intention of causing someone some problems, them having to go through the performance management process and be disciplined. And then there are so many different terms used for workplace bullying. And so you'll hear these, and actually, it's only when I started doing this work sort of 2.5 years ago that I realized that workplace bullying wasn't something that was particularly used in the US. And everyone I spoke to about it initially was like, oh, bullying, that's kind of, you know, like in the schoolyard. I'm like, well, yeah, it's another term for all of these things that you may be more familiar with: workplace aggression, psychological violence, victimization, mobbing, where someone influences a group of people to gang up on someone, hazing, like what happens to new recruits in the military as sort of initiation processes, harassment, discrimination, moral harassment, psychological harassment, social undermining, etc. So, the prevalence of workplace bullying. So in 2021, the Workplace Bullying Institute, so doctors Ruth and Gary Namey conducted a survey that showed in that year, 30% of workers were bullied, compared to 19% 4 years before that. So an 11% rise over 4 years. And in addition to that 30%, 19% of workers witnessed it. And this was a survey of over 1,200 workers. So it was a decent size cohort and a fairly wide-reaching survey. So, you know, almost 50% of workers were in some way affected by workplace bullying. That was estimated at almost 49 million Americans being bullied at work. But given that I've said that, you know, another 19% who witnessed it were also affected by it, comes to over 76 million workers in the States. And, you know, interestingly, we always think of managers as the culprits, you know, as the bad guys, but 40% of the victims were managers themselves. And of course, you know, they could be bullied by other managers or by their own line manager and so on. And remote workers are bullied at a higher rate than others. And I have some statistics here that say 43% of remote workers reported workplace bullying in that period. And 50% of that was happening in meetings, so virtual meetings, but 9% was happening by email. So stuff that, you know, other people couldn't see. So in terms of types of people who are more likely to experience workplace bullying, so according to a survey in 2016 that was conducted by the National Health Service, so the public health system in the UK, 23% of attendings, 20% of trainee doctors, 24% of other doctors and dentists, including non-training grades and non-attending doctors, had experienced workplace bullying, harassment, or abuse in the year leading up to the survey. And the average amount of all NHS staff, so everyone from, you know, the domestics, doctors, nurses, radiographers, CEO, whatever, of all strata within the organization, almost a quarter of all the staff had experienced some form of bullying in that period. And you know, breaking it down a bit, it shows, you know, some quite stark data that disabled staff were far and away the most likely to experience bullying and report it at 32%. LGBTQ plus staff, again, higher than the average at 28%. Ethnic minority staff at the average of 24%, and female staff around that level as well. But comparing them to their white counterparts, you know, they are experiencing it more commonly. And in terms of female doctors, because that's the data that I had, they're significantly more likely to suffer sexual harassment in their careers than men, which is unsurprising. So the prevalence of workplace bullying by gender, kind of like moving on to that quite nicely. From that NHS survey back to the American survey, it showed that 2/3 of workplace bullies are men, while 1/3 are women. And male bullies target women 42% of the time. So they target men almost 60% of the time and women about 40% of the time. But female bullies target fellow women about 2/3 of the time. And so same gender bullying, so men bullying men and women bullying women, accounts for 61% of all bullying, But it's clear to see when you look at that amount, 65% of women bullied by fellow women, 42% bullied by men, that far and away is women experiencing bullying in the workplace more than men. And for people who like it, a bit more kind of infographically, diagrammatically, here it is in an image form. So on the left, the male bullies, 2/3 of bullies are male, 1/3 of bullies in the workplace are female. And then it shows you the breakdown. I think probably there should be 6 dark male figures. Actually, it's more like 6 and 4. But yeah, you can see it looks dramatic, doesn't it, with the number of women being bullied by fellow women. So now we've talked about which types of people are more likely to be the victims of bullying, which types of people are more likely to be the bullies themselves. So it's more often than not, it's cis men. The predominant ethnicity is that they are white. Obviously, with the caveat, then a white majority country like the States or the UK, in places like Japan or India or something, that's obviously not going to be the case. They're lacking, and I've put obvious disability there. And the reason I say that is because obviously going back to the data from the NHS survey about disabled people being more likely to be the victims, you would think that, in quote unquote, able-bodied people are more likely to be the bullies, but obviously there are all sorts of invisible disabilities as well, nervous conditions and psychological conditions and so on. So you don't know that there isn't necessarily a disability, and they're more likely to say they're heterosexual. So this is your kind of caricature of a bully, your profile, to use a sort of FBI term. So why is it that these white, straight men of probably a certain age are more likely to be workplace bullies than any other demographic? And so apart from, them being malignant, narcissistic personalities or being psychopaths, and recently watched a video by an academic that said that 1% of the population are psychopaths, and there's a kind of preponderance of them within kind of the prison system, but also kind of like the financial institutions like Wall Street and so on. But apart from narcissists and psychopaths, what explanations are there possibly? So this is one that is put forward by Dr. Kristen Gies. I would recommend everyone look at her TEDx talk. So the perpetrator is themselves hurting for some reason, because we know that hurt people hurt other people. The perpetrator is insecure. That's tied in with low self-confidence and low self-esteem, and maybe even imposter syndrome. So as a result, if they, if someone in their team is really excellent at doing something and way better at doing it than them, they're going to start feeling threatened, even when there's no obvious threat. It's just that they've got someone in their team who's really good at doing something, and I'm sure this can resonate with all of us. And they think, oh, they're going to take my job or whatever, and so they then try and undermine them and gaslight them, or even do something a bit more overt, because they are feeling threatened and insecure. The perpetrator has low emotional intelligence. So by that, I mean, I'm specifically looking at 3 areas of emotional intelligence here. So lacking self-awareness or insight, and I'll actually come on to this in the next point. Being unable to regulate your emotions. So, kind of flying off the handle, being very reactive. Lacking empathy, so just not kind of like seeing the signs in someone, reading the room, understanding when people are upset, and then the kind of going to the lack of insight, self-awareness side of things. Liz Wiseman, who is another fantastic academic in the States, she talks about this, and again, I'd recommend you watch a YouTube video of hers. where she talks about accidental diminishers. And she gives the example of her father in her video. So he was always like quite a gruff, grumpy, kind of unkind man, but she didn't feel it was intentional. So the people that kind of like, you know, give off that negative, unkind behavior, but they're not even aware that they're being like that. And actually, you know, they think that they're doing the right thing. They think that their parenting style is how it's meant to be. They think that their managerial leadership style is how it's meant to be. They have the best of intentions. So it isn't intentionally negative. It's just they don't really know any better. They don't have any insight. No one's probably taught them. Maybe they've learned from watching other people who've been the same. So how can companies and organizations be proactive about bullying in the workplace? Well, the first thing to do is just get the basics right. This is where a lot of you know, organizations stumble, is they don't get the basics right. So by that I mean have person-centered organizational values that are kind and lived. So, you know, we all know our organizations have these organizational values that are put on our websites. And, you know, we're a kind organization, we're a fair organization, we're a supportive, inclusive organization. And that's great if that really is the intention, you know, and if all those kind of values are filtering down throughout all the levels of the organization so that those values are lived on the shop floor. And I actually spoke to a doctor this morning, and she said that her hospital that she works for, she's an attending, has kindness as one of its values. And she actually genuinely feels that her department, which is pediatrics, is a really, really kind department. So that was nice to hear. Organizations should create policies to develop and promote positive cultures within their organizations. And I think by the culture, I mean, you know, obviously as non-toxic as possible, but being a pervasively compassionate, servant, inclusive, and added to my model of kind leadership is compassionate, servant, inclusive, and relational leadership. So kind of having all of those types of leadership in place. Organizations should foster a culture where their workers, where their employees feel like they have the right to be happy at work, there's a right to a happy work life is normalized. Why should it be the norm that we turn up to work and we kind of like just put up with it being miserable because that's just the way it is, and you know, as long as we do our hours and get out of there, it's all very transactional. But we can enjoy work, and happy workers lead to more productive organizations, which lead to, you know, more profits if it's a corporate or commercial organization. Role model positive behavior by the C-suite and all the leaders. So C-suite, I mean, you know, the executive management team, the CEO, the CFO, the COO, you know, all of the C acronyms. But yeah, chief exec and chief financial officer, chief technology officer, etc., and all the leaders, the senior management team as well, so that everyone within the organization who's kind of below them can look at them and say, they're doing such a good job, they're such good leaders, they're so kind. That's how we should be. That's what this company wants. And again, you know, this kind of comes back to my thing, provide leading through kindness training for all leaders, which kind of thing that I do, kind of essentially training people to be kinder leaders and use those compassionate and servant leadership traits. But when workplace bullying occurs, acknowledge that there's a problem and be proactive about tackling it. This is one of the things, you know, I'll go to organizations and say, you know, I can help you with your workplace bullying issues. And they're like, what do you mean we don't have workplace bullying here? That's ridiculous. How can you suggest that? We all know that it happens in every single organization. So, you know, just own it and say, we see it's a problem and we want to do something about it. So what can organizations do? How can they be proactive about bullying in the workplace? So a lot of this happens in healthcare in the UK, where we have freedom to speak up guardians, where people are on the receiving end of bullying can go and speak to a guardian confidentially. Have a very firm open door policy. You know, it has to be open door, and a transparent policy and an accessible complaint procedure for workplace bullying. So, you know, it's kind of open door, transparent, accessible. Not kind of like, oh, where's the policy? Oh no, we can't go and see our boss. You know, it's not accessible. That's not, that's not acceptable. Train line managers to handle workplace bullying and to train others, because oftentimes we know a lot of managers just don't have a clue how to deal with it, and they'll just, maybe they are well-intentioned, but they'll sweep it under the carpet because they're actually fearful of having to deal with it. Encourage the reporting of these things to line managers or to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. Monitor organizational data to identify patterns so you can target interventions. And what can your line manager herself or himself do? They can provide training on inappropriate behavior and its impact to their whole team. So everyone in the team knows what's unacceptable and inappropriate. And they can be trained to identify early warning signs and to challenge inappropriate behaviors. They're in a position of authority. They're the best ones to be able to challenge inappropriate behaviors. But they should respond quickly and kindly. And again, not be afraid of dealing with this and just kind of like, sweeping under the rug and then letting it fester for months. And in the meantime, the poor victim is suffering more and more psychological harm over the ensuing months. So how should companies respond after an incident occurs or it's been reported? With kindness to both parties. And the reason why I say that is because, it's an allegation at the start, isn't it? We don't know if it's a vexatious complaint and someone's just trying to get someone in trouble. I've seen that a lot in healthcare. So on the assumption that, innocent till proven guilty, so be kind to both parties, do it quickly, just get on with it. Don't let the grass grow. Have a transparent process, deal with it kind of thoroughly, comprehensively. Be impartial, be neutral, be objective, bring someone in from the outside if necessary. Be proportionate in your response. So many times we see people being hugely punished for little, trivial things, and then people who've done massive things seem to kind of get away with it. That's just not acceptable. And respond according to the disciplinary or workplace bullying policy. So that means actually having a policy written and keeping it up to date, and deal with it conclusively. Like don't have it kind of like, dragging on. Sometimes these things like legal matters, they go on for years. Well, all that kind of psychological harm that's going on while it's being dealt with. So what can you do if you see someone else being bullied? At the time, are you satisfied objectively, given what you know about workplace bullying now and the definition that what you're witnessing is a form of bullying or harassment? If you are, and you feel so empowered, speak up and call it out. That takes a huge amount of courage to do, especially if the perpetrator is quite intimidating. So, I do sort of say, gauge that on a case-by-case basis. If you don't do anything, are you, complicit with the bully by your silence, as in the bystander effect? But context is everything. You need to think about your position, your role, the bully's position, the career ramifications of your actions. If you call something out and then you're putting yourself in danger of a whole world of pain and having to leave the job yourself or being sacked, you can't help anyone else in the future. But is there anything else you can do? Can you fetch another witness? Can you get someone else? And then if you see someone being bullied after the event, are you still satisfied that it was a form of bullying or harassment? And take the victim aside, ask them how they are, like really ask them how they are. Just listen to them, check if they felt they were being bullied. We have different kind of levels and different tolerances. We may not have felt we were being bullied. They may have just felt, well, I was being a bit oversensitive and that person was just particularly grumpy today. It wasn't actually bullying. It may be that the bully kind of does it to everyone. So it's like, well, don't take it personally. It's not you. It's just, they do it to everyone sort of thing. That's not acceptable, but that can be, one way of explaining it. And just offer them a safe metaphorical and literal space. Find an office, find a meeting room to support them. Just listen and let them talk about it. And just reassure them that you saw it. It didn't appear to be their fault. They're not alone. We know the data now. We know the statistics. It's very, very common. And they've no reason to feel ashamed. I was speaking to someone yesterday who said that they didn't report an incident because, they felt so much shame. They didn't want to make it look as if they were kind of, the ones at fault and kind of like just bringing shame upon themselves. It's terrible, really. And if something has happened to you similarly and you feel able to be vulnerable, then share your experience of workplace bullying with them. But I'm not saying everyone should do that. It's just if you feel, able to do that. And finally, I love this quote. Let's just end this talk on this quote because it's very uplifting and positive. It's by Rabbi Harold Kushner, who's based in New York. Do things for people, not because of who they are or what they do in return, but because of who you are. So here's a summary. These were the aims and objectives. The next speaker is here, so I'm not going to go through them all, but I think we went through everything very, very quickly. As I say, if you want to reach out to me and want me to kind of go into it in more detail for you individually or for your organizations, then please reach out to me. My contact details are here. Hopefully Hunter and the team can pass them on. And again, have a listen to my podcast. And thank you so much for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Adam Harrison. Always a pleasure to have you here. Always a pleasure. Thank you for making the time.
Bless you, Hunter. Thanks so much for having me. And I think I need to let your next speaker carry on. Sorry, it just ran out of time, I think. Anyway.
Oh, 1 minute. It's all comes out in the wash. And thank you for your patience for our next speaker. And thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Adam. Have a great day. Okay.
Thanks so much, Hunter.